You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right, folks, welcome and happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dangerous Liberty Podcast, where we know that safety at the expense of liberty is slavery. We got a great show for you, a great guest tonight. I can't wait to talk about this. I think this is probably one of the most important podcasts we've ever had. We're going to get knee deep into mental health and just overall health in general and what's going on here in the United States. We'll spend some time talking to our guest. I'm going to have him introduce himself. And then towards the end, we're going to bring you in. We'll make sure that we cover all your questions. I'll be reading your comments throughout. And if there's something that's relevant at the time, I may throw that up there as well. But we will definitely include you on the conversation. We want to hear your stories, want to read your comments, and definitely want to take your questions. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Dr. Andrew Zywiec. Doc, if you will, go ahead and just give everybody a little introduction of yourself. Tell us a little about you, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my name is Dr. A lot of people just call me Doc or Doc Z. I went to The Ohio State University. I studied biology and chemistry. I graduated magna cum laude. I did a little bit of research in thermodynamics, inflammatory cascades, and phospholipase. Did some work in actin-plastin dynamics and cancer metastasis. I graduated in 2014, magna cum laude. I went and did a dual program master's and medical doctorate with St. George's University. I trained out of the University of Southern California in neuroimaging and neural algorithms, doing some brain mapping and Alzheimer's disease. I graduated 2019 cum laude from med school. I started practice and I was teaching as well. I started practice in Brooklyn, New York in 2020 at the beginning of COVID in Ground Zero in Brooklyn. And then I left hospital medicine in 2023, started private practice, started doing a lot more natural healing modalities as I've been aligned with a lot of the things in the allopathic model. And now I do a lot of research as well, a lot of research in COVID and things of that nature.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Number one, thank you for coming on. And I'll just share with everybody the way that I found Doc was through Twitter. And I guess the algorithm knew that we were of like mind because he was sharing some stuff that I'd never seen. Even some of the more prominent medical professionals out there that are a little bit more outspoken than the rest. Some stuff that I knew was very controversial. So number one, thanks for having the courage to share the information that you do on your page. You've talked a lot about mental health. You've talked about SSRIs and antidepressants. One of the things I just recently saw you talking about was transition and outspoken against. So again, you're just a voice of reason in a sea of unreasonable people. They're pushing narratives and politics ahead of actual people's health. And if you guys aren't following him on Twitter, down in the description below, I listed his website, his Twitter feed. And again, you guys can find some information there, but very enlightening. I really appreciate you coming on, Doc. Really, let's talk a little bit about mental health, the model that we're seeing here in the United States, because when you look at what's going on in the US and how effective these treatments are, there's more people that are medicated. There's more people going to see therapists and psychologists, and it doesn't seem to have a net positive effect overall. What's your thoughts on what's going on here in the US?
I'd say it's had a net negative effect, right? It's had negative efficacy over the years. So I think the monoamine hypothesis of serotonin and dopamine and why mental health is the way that it is has been largely debunked over the years. And just to point out something very simplistic, when you go in and you get diagnosed for something like depression, they're not taking a blood test. So they're not doing something empirical to measure your serotonin levels, right? And even if they took your serotonin levels in the blood, that doesn't correlate to your serotonin levels in the brain. And even if they took the serotonin levels in your brain, that wouldn't be able to be correlated to your fluctuations in moods on a day-to-day basis or a moment-to-moment basis. When you get to the nitty-gritty of the neuroscience involved in the psychiatric model, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny in any way, shape, or form. So what winds up happening is you go in and you start talking to a therapist about regular standard emotions, right? People get depressed. People have anxiety. People have to unpack trauma throughout their life. These are normal things that happen in normal life that people need to learn how to deal with effectively. But what they'll do is they'll utilize some algorithmic process to fit you into a small box and diagnose you. something for depression, for instance, what they'll use is something called a CCAPS mnemonic, and that's sleep, interest, guilt, energy, concentration, appetite, psychomotor retardation, which is like slowed movements, slowed speech, things like that, and then suicidal, homicidal ideation. If you check more than 5 of those for a period of greater than 14 days, boom, you are diagnosed with depression. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain, and you need to take this pill in order to correct that balance. And again, I'm going to point out that they used a completely subjective thing to profile you. They asked a couple questions. They didn't actually do any exams. And then they put you on a pharmaceutical agent, a petrochemical that can alter the neurotransmission of serotonin in your brain, not knowing the downstream effects, not knowing what's going to happen. And then when they bring you back 2-3 months later, they're going to ask you the same questions. They're not going to measure anything, and they're not going to do any more empirical imaging or anything like that. So when you look at something like this model, on its face, it seems very flawed. When you get deeper into the research, it is very flawed, and it was built on faulty premises. In today's world, what they've really done is they've pathologicalized normal human emotions and weaponized them against the patient in order to feed them pharmaceutical agents that make them money in order to bring you back as a repeat client. So doctors appear to be much more like drug dealers and pimps on street corners than they are healers in this day and age. And I can go into, I'm more than happy to expand on any of that, but just for an initial approach to it, that's my take on it.
No, and part of that, there's really no incentive for them to, number one, to tell anybody, hey, you know what? You're just going through a bad period in your life. Things are going to get better. Go eat, go get exercise. They're not incentivized to do that. They need to diagnose you so that they're going to have you coming back as a patient. They need to be able to prescribe you something so that they can confirm their diagnosis with and through a prescription. And then, of course, there's other incentives involved when it comes to the prescription model of things like that. One of the things it was hilarious to me because yesterday I was actually watching and listening to the Joe Rogan podcast with Chase Hughes. And Chase Hughes is a expert in influence, persuasions, and he works for the government. And he basically is a professional and expert in getting people to agree to do things that are against their own interests. And he was going through his own little algorithm of how he gets people to do that. And when he was going through these things that he was talking about, I remember being at the VA, talking to this psychiatrist and him saying, do you experience this? Do you experience this? And it was very akin to the brainwashing and convincing you that you're something that you're possibly not. And I thought that was, it just struck me as odd. But really what they're doing is they're selling you on the idea that you're sick, that you need help. And they're selling a product ultimately.
Yeah.
And the way that mental health is being addressed here in the United States. And now we're seeing kids as young as 3, 4, 5 years old being taken to psychologists, being taken to psychiatrists, and being put on antidepressants and other drugs and everything from ADHD to you name it, whatever else they can diagnose any kid with or person with. And it's just a terrible model. And clearly the outcomes have not improved. We have more depression. We have more suicides than we've ever seen before. And I don't even want to get started on the VA model because I think that's even worse. But it's nuts to me what's going on in America. And it's crazy to me that most people aren't paying more attention to it, quite frankly.
There's a lot of yarns to really pull at in this story. Number one of the things you have to look at is how much work does it take to make a patient, if they really are going through something or they really have extreme depression or something really bad is happening in their life. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of work on both the clinician and on the patient, right? To do that work and to get through things because life is tough, right? But clinicians, it's a lot easier to write a script, to write a pill. Somehow along the way, what they've been able to do is that they've been able to disempower the patient, right? Because with the model the way it is right now, the patient doesn't have to take any responsibility for their life. If a pill can fix you, because it's genetic. By the way, there's no gene for alcoholism. There's no gene for anxiety. There's no gene for depression. Despite looking for these things for the greater part of 60 years, there are no genes for this, right? There's a nature versus nurture argument. And it used to be considered to be 50-50. And the geneticist said everything is in your encoding. And then the behavioralist said, no, it's how you're raised or your nature. What we've come to find is that medicine has gone over a cliff on the argument that almost everything is genetic and that you're not in control, when in reality, that's maybe 5% of it. The vast majority, 95%, it actually is nurture. It's your environment. It's your nutrition. It's your exercise. It's your sleep. It's all of these things in combination to what's actually occurring in your life. And what they've been able to do is disempower the patient by selling them these ideas that you just have a broken brain, or that you just have a broken mind, and that you yourself are broken, so that you'll accept a pill. You'll give up your power over your life and your ability to understand your position. And you will give that up for a pill. And the doctor, they don't take any responsibility, because everything is just the responsibility of the pharmaceutical agent or the hospital that stands behind them. When you leave their office, you're out of sight, out of mind, right? So they've disempowered the patient, and they've disenfranchised the doctor, and they've removed all responsibility. So at this point, they're not incentivized in any way to do anything. And I'm not trying to say that they're all bad people, because that's not actually the case. But they have been sold a bill of goods that's a complete lie. I would say my undergraduate education was very rigorous. I was highly involved in a lot of things. I was in the top 1% of academics in the country. By the time I got to med school, though, med school just seemed a pharmaceutical sales pitch. It was training you to diagnose illnesses based on algorithms, and then exactly what was next is what to prescribe for it in terms of a petropharmaceutical product. So the idea was no longer how to correct the situation. It was just check this box, write this script, and go about your day. And that's unfortunately the way the allopathic model is designed. It is, if there's something wrong in the body that you notice, there's clinical symptoms and signs, the body is doing something wrong, and you must oppose that action in order to find homeostasis. So if the body pushes too far this way, you push back this way to maintain homeostasis, and you use a drug to do that. That's not actually the case, because that assumes that the body is in some way stupid or foolish or unintelligently designed, which if you study the body in even the most minute detail, you know that it's wildly intelligently designed. We know about 1.1% of what the body's doing at any given moment. So 99% we don't know, it's just doing what it should be doing. So when the body's going in this direction, you need to know why it's headed in this direction. And then you need to help it along in that direction in order to get to the goal that the body's trying to achieve. So the oppositional model, which is allopathic medicine, is actually completely wrong. The naturopathic model is much more correct. And then the osteopathic model is somewhere in the middle.
Do this for me. Define allopathic model.
Sure. So naturopathic medicine, right, is that everything is natural, right? If the body's always working in the best directive for itself. And naturopaths can get pretty extreme with this idea, like that bacteria are only beneficial. You know, that bacteria in your gut, right? Very good for you, obviously. They maintain the mucosal barrier. They digest a bunch of things. They don't allow things into your body that shouldn't be able to get into your body, so forth and so on. They participate in the neurological system. But if bacteria get in the wrong place, right, if the bacteria in the GI winds up in your lungs, you get pneumonia, right? But the naturopathic model is essentially everything good is natural. Quinine comes from cinchona bark. Aspirin comes from the willow bark. Opiates come from the poppy. Nature gave us everything, so that's what we should use. The allopathic model, and that's the naturopathic, is the one that says the body's always moving in the right direction. You just might not know why it's doing that. The allopathic model is almost instinctively the opposite of that. The allopathic model is your MD, your medical doctor. All medical doctors that are trained are MDs, they're allopathic. And the allopathic model is if there's something wrong in the body, you can fight it and oppose it with a chemical product like a pharmaceutical. And then osteopathic medicine is your DOs. And they're somewhere in the middle. We can use allopathic models of medicine when it's beneficial to us, and we can use naturopathic models when it's beneficial to us. And osteopaths, in my opinion, by and large, probably have the best approach to medicine, but that was maybe 30 years ago. Now, osteopaths, DOs, and MDs are pretty much the same thing. They go to the same school, the same indoctrination camp.
What are they doing wrong? When we talk about this model, if there's somebody that's not feeling well, they're feeling depressed, they're going to sit down in front of a psychiatrist or psychologist, and what would your fix to this be?
When's the last time you went to a doctor?
Like any doctor or like a mental health
Doctor.
I don't know, freaking 5 months ago.
Did they talk to you about your diet?
No, I talked to him about my diet, actually.
And but he didn't ask you about your diet, and you didn't have a conversation about it. How about your sleep?
No, definitely not.
How about your exercise?
No.
How about what's actually happening in your life? Your relationship status, your marriage, if you have children?
No.
Your job, stress?
No.
These are all the things that you have to approach as a doctor, because the very first things that you have to take into consideration is the day-to-day of the patient's life. Every single question that I am asking when a patient comes in revolves around what's going on in their life. And if you're not talking about diet and sleep and stress mitigation and relationships and all of these things, where do you work? What's your environment like? What kind of toxins are around you? What you do for work tells me a whole lot about what things you're predisposed to, because it tells me what's in your environment that could actually affect you. These are the most standard things that you should speak to about a doctor. And if your doctor's not asking those things right off the bat, then they're not there for your health. They're there to write you a drug, right? If somebody comes in with depression, you could have low vitamin D, and low vitamin D can cause depression. You could have a different chronic illness. Your thyroid could be off, right? You could have 50 things causing depression, but it's never really approached in that fashion. It's approached in this fashion, this very algorithmic sequential pattern. I would say we need to get back to where the roots of medicine actually began. And if you go back and look at the history of medicine, and this is unfortunately another thing, they don't teach these kinds of things. You don't learn philosophy in medicine. You don't learn history in medicine. You don't learn a lot of things that you should learn in medicine. But if you go back to 1910, John D. Rockefeller, who monopolized the oil industry, decided that he was going to monopolize the medical industry to sell pharmaceutical products that are based in oil. And what he did is he bought up the whole medical establishment. He privatized the American Medical Association and weaponized it against naturopaths and anybody who was using anything naturopathic or homeopathic. He funded Flexner to write the Flexner Report, which basically told physicians that you should not seek underlying issues, that you should just treat the symptoms in front of you, which is mostly just like sorcery. If you come in to see me, I can quell anything. If you're having anxiety, I can give you a benzo and I can crush your anxiety. If I'm reading your numbers and your cholesterol is high, I can get those numbers wherever I want them using a pharmaceutical like statins. I can manipulate anything to fix you in the short term or to make you feel like you have been fixed in the short term. But that has no longevity. It doesn't last into the future. So it is like sorcery. It's pharmakia, where the root of all of this is to treat naturopathically. And I go back to saying the naturopaths have a lot of things right. Everything that we have comes from nature. Again, aspirin is from willow bark. Quinine, one of the most useful drugs on the planet, is from cinchona. Penicillin is from fungus because fungus knows how to fight off bacteria. Everything that we need is truly in nature. It's just learning how to utilize it correctly. But going back to this, the unfortunate aspect of where they go wrong in medicine is they've become so synthetic in their approach towards medicine. There's a loss of faith. There's a loss of curiosity. There's a loss of the desire to be a healer and to understand all of these things from a biology perspective, a chemistry perspective, physics. Most doctors you meet, they'll talk to you about how they hated this coursework and how they hated chemistry, or they hated this bio class, or OChem was a nightmare, or they hated physiology, or they just never really understood immunology. Then you're not a doctor. Then you became a doctor because you liked the pretty scrubs and you wanted to bedazzle a stethoscope and you were really interested in driving a Maserati and having people praise you. And unfortunately, these are the kinds of people that are attracted to the medical establishment today because we've made doctors gods to our public. Yeah. So these aren't doctors, right? These are by and large degenerates that just want a paycheck.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there just too. It's about selling them something, right? And whether that's more visits to the doctor, it's definitely not about getting you off of medicine. There's nothing that I've seen that indicates that anybody wants anyone to heal. Ultimately, it's about getting them drugged up, getting them on a drug that they're going to take for life. And that's what takes place. Let's talk a little bit about whether you want to go with SSRIs, benzos, whatever you want to talk about. Let's talk about the negative side effects, because I think that is not discussed enough. You're offered this because there's people that are very depressed, that are suffering. They go to a doctor and they're just looking for something that's going to make them feel better. And like you said, in the short term, some of these medications will definitely do that. But in the long term, they have dramatic physical side effects and negative on your health. I was just reading one study. It says increases your risk of death by 33%, SSRIs. So talk a little bit about those.
So let's talk about SSRIs. First and foremost, what are they? Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and their twin is selective serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And serotonin and norepinephrine are two of the neurotransmitters that operate in your brain for all conscious thought and are heavily tied to emotions. Now, in a two neuron network, right? Like one neuron talks to the next neuron talks to the next one. Your first neuron releases serotonin, right? And it releases it into the synapse and it binds to the second neuron, and then the second neuron fires, right? So what this does is it blocks the receptor. After this one releases it, that'll get recycled back into it at some point in time. But it gives it enough time to react on this next neuron. So SSRIs block the reuptake at this first neuron. So that allows for the concentration to last for a longer period of time to invoke transmission down this next neuron. And in some short-sighted, very myopic view, they thought that this was going to be a very beneficial way to treat depression. Now, two of the problems that initially come up biochemically right off the bat is that receptors, once you increase longevity or concentration of a product, receptors downregulate. The body makes the right amount of things for the most part, by and large. So what you wind up doing is actually reducing the amount of receptors that would be reactive to serotonin in the first place over time. So initially you might get a surge. So you might feel better, 2 to 4 week pattern, 6 weeks, something like that. But then you start to downregulate because your body's trying to adapt to what it sees as a poison, as you poisoning it, because you're trying to alter the chemistry of the body and it doesn't like that. So some of the issues is we have no idea, none, what kind of long-term effects this actually has at the biochemical level on the brain. No clue. This is just experimentation. And what we see from a clinical perspective is patients, one of the major things is severe sexual dysfunction, right? That's actually the major reason that most people come off of SSRIs. And some people never get their function back, okay? And let's think about this. Sex is a pretty important thing to most human beings, right? Yeah. Whether it be for pleasure, whether it be for having a relationship with somebody you love, or whether it have to be with producing offspring. It's a pretty important thing in biology. So if you destroy somebody's ability to have sex for the rest of their life, and there are cases where as much as one pill did this, that's how crazy it can get because the brain is complex. That's one thing. Weight gain. It does manipulate your neurolimbic system, so your emotional systems. Most school shooters were on SSRIs or coming off of SSRIs. Yeah. Okay. And again, so this messes with the limbic system. The adverse effects can range from increased anxiety, increased depression, to the black label warnings of increased suicide and increased homicidal ideation, right? And these things are almost never discussed. If somebody said, hey, you're depressed, and then, by the way, they didn't ask you why. They didn't check your thyroid levels or check your vitamin levels or your minerals or talk about your diet, or they didn't say, oh, you just got divorced, or, oh, you just lost a child. And they didn't really talk about any of this. They said, oh, 15-minute visit. You have a chemical imbalance in your brain. And then they said, I have this pill and it might make you feel better. By the way, that might is no better than the placebo. It's never been shown to have a better effect than the placebo effect, right? So it hasn't actually ever been shown to work, but it has been shown to increase your risk of killing yourself, increase your risk of killing other people, deepening your depression, worsening your anxiety, obliterating your sexual function, increasing obesity, and a whole slew of other things. Do you still want that pill? No, you don't want that pill. And of course, they're not going to sell it to you like that. And again, I get enough blowback from the psych industry as it is. They're inevitably going to say, that's not how we do it. We probe deeper and we talk more. If you did, the statistics wouldn't be showing what the statistics show. And we wouldn't have 15 to 20% of the population showing up with depression and anxiety. And we wouldn't have at least 1 out of 5 people on an SSRI. There are 47 million people on SSRIs in the United States right now. There are over 4 million on an antipsychotic. There are over 3 million on a benzodiazepine. And there's 97 million on statins, which block cholesterol, and they cause neurological problems that can enhance these problems, so forth and so on. So we are in a complete nightmare of pharmacology and mental health issues in this country.
Yeah, no, even just like you talked about it, if the word was out where they actually said, you know what, 80% or whatever the number is, whatever the percentage of active shooters in school shooting, they were on SSRIs or other antidepressants, people would stop and have a different discussion than what we've been having. It's all guns. Guns have been prolific here in the United States for a really long time. Kids take the gun. The biggest difference is how we're addressing mental health. There's some other factors involved. Social media is definitely a factor. The fact that kids don't exercise anymore is a factor. They stay inside the house all day. All of those things are factor, but clearly what we're doing from the mental health side isn't helping in any way. And the other thing you touched on, we hit a bunch of these negative side effects that they minimize. And that's the problem. They minimize these negative side effects, and then they maximize, or they try to exaggerate the benefits of these drugs. And that's only even if you trust the studies. We see the studies that we're just now seeing, the American people are just now getting a glimpse behind the curtain of what the bullshit studies that were done on the COVID vaccine and how they promise it's going to stop it in its tracks. You can't transmit. And come to find out that all of those studies, if there were ever even studies in some of those particular promises, they were bullshit. They were just fabricated, and they were nonsense, and nobody would think for a second that they made sense. And that's what we're seeing industry wide with every.
I want to touch on two things if I can.
Please.
So first, I also didn't talk about the side effects of coming off of these drugs.
Yeah.
Coming off of these medications is an absolute nightmare. It takes years for people's neurochemistry to get back to place, if it even does. And I won't go too deep into it, but I just wanted to state that. And the other thing about the benzos that we talked, benzos are just alcohol in a pill.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally just alcohol in a pill. When it works on the GABA receptor, the same way alcohol works on the GABA receptor, it has the same intoxication profile, it has the same exact withdrawal profile, and it works on the same receptors. It is alcohol in a pill. So when you go in for a panic attack into the hospital, they can't give you a shot of liquor, right? If somebody's really nervous and really on nerves, what do people say in the past? Have a sip of wine, drink a beer, relax, calm down. That's because alcohol increases parasympathetic nervous system in your body. But sympathetic versus parasympathetic is fight or flight versus rest and digest. So it increases the rest and digest and mellows out the sympathetic nervous system. Now, that's exactly what alcohol does, but they can't give you alcohol in the hospital. So what they did is they built it in a pill, and then they put it in an IV bag so they can give you it in a pill. And then coming off of benzos is alcohol addiction. It's the same exact thing. Coming off of benzos is identical to alcohol addiction. What's the primary treatment for alcohol addiction other than cessation? One of them is benzodiazepines for withdrawal, right? Because it is just giving them alcohol again. Instead of telling them to not drink 24 beers in a day, just maybe drink 18 and then drink 12 and then drink 6. And after several weeks, you'll be done. You just say, don't drink any alcohol, take this benzo, which is alcohol in a pill, and wean it off. So it's just another sales tactic. And what you said about COVID, anytime somebody says anything is 100% safe, 100% effective, 100% reduces this, 100% increases this, it's a lie. Yeah. Anything that says 100% is a lie. There's no thing in modern medicine or science that is 100% for anything. Nothing's 100% safe. That was a dead giveaway that should have been jumped on by the medical establishment. But what we found in the last several years in particular is something that historians have said for millennia. People that have faith in institutions, and sometimes the most educated are the people with the most faith in the most institutions, are the easiest ones to brainwash because they're so dogmatic in their belief systems.
Yeah, it's a religion to them. There's no doubt about it. And whatever institution they believe in, whether it's government, whether it's HHS, whether it's NIH, whatever it is, that's their church. And unfortunately, Anthony Fauci was a lot of people's pope during that debacle, and that guy should be in prison.
Well, hang the Pope. His minions are going to be upset.
Yeah. And I hope to God, we were talking about, I don't know if you can share some of the information you were sharing with me prior to this, but I wasn't aware of that. Can you share some of that information about HHS, or you want to stay away from that?
For right now, I will steer clear, but let's put it this way. There are many people that are working incredibly diligently, and I am one of them, on uncovering all of the falsehoods and all of the wrongdoings at the scientific levels on COVID. And we've been working on this for many years. We have been silenced, suppressed. We've had death threats by the thousands. We had the full weight of the government knocking at our doorstep for the last 5 years. But there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I haven't even seen any of your work on COVID. And again, some of the conversations we were having prior to the show going live, we definitely need to have you back and just have a discussion on that. I'd love to see some of the information, some of the evidence, and some of the studies that you are working on with that, because that is still a stone that's not been completely turned. And I think, it's just nuts what our government has told us, tried to get us to do, how they manipulated us. And man, if you ever trust the government after the last few years, I don't know what to say. You're an idiot. I don't know what to say about it. It's just nuts. Coming off those is a real problem. So I guess ultimately one of the things, and I have a family member that has been on different psych meds. And by the way, Team 55, MX, and several others, as you present questions, I'm highlighting them. I will get to them, I promise you. So if you do have a question, throw it up there. I'm going to highlight it and we'll bring it back up to the doc here in just a little bit. But I have a family member that's been diagnosed with different issues, and this person has been put on one medicine after another, and none of them seem to be working, but we're just playing chemistry games and experimenting on this person with really no end in sight.
That's what it always looks like. It's not unique. This story's not unique. This is almost every single person that's been inside of the psychiatric hamster wheel, if you will. They can change the diagnosis at will. They can change the medication at will. If this doesn't work, let's increase the dosage. If that doesn't work, let's switch it out for this one. If that doesn't work, maybe you don't have this, let's re-diagnose you. There's always an out for all of this. And if you want to come off, first and foremost, none of these things were ever meant for long-term use. Medications generally are not used for long-term use. If you have type 1 diabetes and your beta cells are shot in your pancreas and you don't produce insulin, then yes, you need to take insulin. And you're going to need insulin for the rest of your life because you literally don't have the organ system functioning that is required for that to be. But for most medications, they're not used for long-term scales. And all of the SSRIs, SNRIs, benzodiazepines, they were never meant for long-term. They're always meant for acute care. And somehow we've fallen into this chronic illness pattern. And it's incentivized, not just by the doctors, it's incentivized in our culture, right? People, their mental illness on their arm like it's a badge of honor. At some point, people on social media platforms with backgrounds that say, I'm a narcissist diagnosed with bipolar, ask me anything. Like, where have we gone? We've completely failed our society. And unfortunately, the children growing up in this generation are the ones that we've failed the most, because not only are they ingesting all sorts of toxic chemicals and garbage food and processed nonsense, and not only are they also entwined into the nightmare that is social media, they're also being drugged very young with all of these things. As you said, there's children going in that are just having a hard time at school or something, and they're being diagnosed with depression or anxiety. I had a doctor one time, a patient came in and they saw the patient, they came back and they looked at me and they said, the patient prays. And I said, okay, the patient prays. And they said they talk to God. And I said, okay, so the patient says they pray and talk to God. And they said, that's a delusion. What do we do? They said, what has gotten into your head that you would say something like that? People, they've lost all common sense. Like I said, it's literally like working with cyborgs. When I was in New York, right, I was in Brooklyn. It was dark days. It was the middle of COVID, bad times. It all hit me like a ton of bricks early in my medical career. It was just a bunch of robots taking their marching orders in this big machine that literally just chews human beings up and spits them out. And that's what our medical apparatus is. Our medical apparatus is 4 times larger than the United States military. It's a $5 trillion a year industry. It's something to behold, put it that way.
And it's got to be probably the most government subsidized industry in the U.S. I can't think of anything that we spend more on. We definitely don't. We don't even spend that on defense. That's another part of it too. And that's another reason why we have so much capture within our own government too, when we're looking at Congress and presidents and state and local governments as well. And again, just like you said, whether we're talking about politicians, we're talking about medical professionals, there's lots of folks out there that are extremely well intended, but they only know what they're told. And when you're told, hey, this is what fixes this, that's what you're going to push for. And man, how do we change the medical industry from just drinking from whatever hose that's thrown in their face, because that's what's going on with this?
That's to me, it's a simple question. Burn it all down. There is something to be said about this. The whole allopathic model was based on lies. The entire institution, dating back to its inception in the early 1900s, was all based on lies. The system's not broken. The system is working exactly as it should. It is working almost too perfectly as it was designed to do. This is a system that generates profit off of disease creation and illness perpetuation. So it's not broken. It needs to be dismantled. It needs to be ripped down, and we need to start from the ground up. And I think more and more people are recognizing that's what needs to be done. People are scared, right? Medicine's an institution, right? People are terrified of ripping it down, but it needs to be ripped down. People are terrified of going without all of these medications and living a more natural substantive life, but that's what needs to be done. And people are terrified of going up against a giant like Big Pharma. But look, you go up against Goliath and you win or you lose, but we don't fight these fights based on the idea of whether or not you're going to win or you're going to lose. You're a soldier. I'm sure that you understand this. We don't pick and choose our battles on the ones that we know are righteous, the ones that we know are worth the fight, and let the chips fall where they may. But if nobody fights this, we already see where this is headed. They're rolling out self-amplifying mRNA in Japan. New Zealand and Australia are now getting it into their legal apparatus, into their parliamentary, that the government can inject them with experimental gene therapies based on emergency mandates. This is quickly and dangerously turning into complete tyranny and total control. So we have to fight back. And if we look at just this last election was a medical election. And if people aren't paying attention, the medical apparatus is the strongest arm of the military right now. It is. They are carrying out the marching orders, and they are the ones executing the orders. A medical election based on COVID mandates and biochemical warfare, and based on mutilation of children and drugging of our population, which is warfare to me. So we are in a very precarious position, but rather than look at it from an optimistic perspective of we can rebuild, but first we need to tear down.
Explain exactly what self-amplifying mRNA is.
So the COVID vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. And what this basically means, there's a central dogma, if you will, about biology. There's DNA. This is the whole blueprint of your body, all the instructions. When you want to rip a page out of that instruction book, you make something called RNA. And then when you want to build, you take that RNA, follow the instructions, and you build a protein. So DNA, RNA, protein. And proteins carry out the function. mRNA is one page of instructions. DNA is the large page, the whole book. Most vaccines are the actual virus or they're a protein. This was different. This was an mRNA sequence, right? That was injected into people. Now that mRNA gets read and creates the protein. In this case, the spike protein. Now, the problem with this is, there's many problems. One of the major problems with this is the mRNA that they built has something called N1-methylpseudouridine. And without going into detail, it means that this is stabilized mRNA. It doesn't break down easily. Normally, the body breaks down mRNA as soon as it's done. This persists for a long period of time, which means it just keeps churning out the spike protein. It's a little factory. It uses the cell as the factory. Here's the instruction. Keep spitting out the spike protein. Now, that's bad enough because now we see long vaccine injury and we see long COVID, and we need to dampen the protein and we need to eliminate the RNA in order to defeat this. The next thing that they have down the pipeline is self-amplifying mRNA. So the mRNA itself codes for another protein that rewrites it. So now you not only have this spike protein being produced indefinitely, the instructions are now recreated indefinitely. So if I injected you with 100 mRNA molecules to cure you, I would just need to get rid of those 100 mRNA molecules. Now, no, I inject you with 100, it becomes 1 trillion.
Wow. Interesting. Now, what is the proposed medical purpose and advantage of that?
There isn't one. It's incredibly dangerous. And everything that I can think about it is problematic. The mRNA in general, not even the self-amplifying one, the mRNA should have never been used, ever. The lipid nanoparticle delivery system should have never been used. Think about it like this. Before they ever built this and unleashed it on the public, number one, the research goes back as early as the 1920s on this biochemical weapon, first and foremost. That's how long this has been in the mix. The lipid nanoparticle was known to cause inflammation and clotting. The spike protein was known to cause inflammation, clotting, and cause heart damage and be able to deposit in tissues and so forth and so on. The mRNA was built and made to persist in the body. This is all known before they rolled it out. So when you think about that, there are 1,000 things that you can look at and say, this is known. Everybody's turning and saying incompetence. This isn't incompetence. At every single turn, this was weaponized to become more and more dangerous. In fact, they did viral enhancement studies on this stuff. Viral enhancement is gain of function. And gain of function is not technically illegal, but gain of function is not supposed to be used to create bioweapons.
You said they're rolling out the self-replicating or self-amplifying mRNA in Japan. How are they selling that? What's the sales pitch on that?
I don't even think that most people know that they're getting self-amplifying mRNA. People just think they're getting a vaccine. Right? I don't think the last time, I'm sure that you've been vaccinated because you went to MEPS when you were a young man. You probably got 20 shots.
Oh.
They didn't tell you what was in this vaccine. They don't tell you, hey, guess what? This is a single-stranded RNA vaccine. This is a double-stranded DNA. This is a protein conjugate vaccine. They don't tell you any of that. They also don't tell you all the things that are in vaccines. They also don't tell you the adverse effects of vaccines. They don't tell you that there's a national vaccine injury compensation fund just in case this destroys you. They don't tell you any of those things. They just give you a shot. And because it's normalized in our society, people just roll up their sleeve. So as far as the stuff in Japan, I have no idea how they're selling it. But I know when it comes to America, people won't even know. I bet you there's a very large majority of people in the United States that still don't even know that the COVID vaccine was RNA or what that even means.
Now, I hate that I don't really hate it, but I know we're getting away from the mental health. I do have a quick question on that, though. The Johnson & Johnson, what was the difference between the Johnson and the mRNA shots? And is there one that's better, like, versus that, the one-time shot versus the mRNA that you needed 47 boosters for?
So I have never looked at the Johnson because that wasn't the mRNA platform. So I have paid little to zero attention to it. So don't take me at my word, but that was a standard vaccine. Like
Gotcha.
that was utilizing the same old school processes and so forth and so on. So I didn't pay too much attention to that one.
Gotcha. Yeah, during the time when COVID initially broke out, I was working for Department of State Diplomatic Security, and I was traveling to embassies and consulates, and of course, they were all about the vaccine. And I ended up opting for the Johnson & Johnson. I wanted one shot, get out of here. I know initially they pulled that for a little bit because women were supposedly having blood clotting issues. I don't know that I've had any. Anyways, I guess I've been thankful that I got that one because this was like literally at the cusp when nobody was thinking that, hey, we're being bamboozled by the government and this is all bullshit. It was like, hey, this is real serious. Everybody was afraid. Everybody was afraid to get it. I had a job to do. They weren't going to let me travel without it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, like I said, I don't know enough about the J&J to actually have a substantive discussion on the J&J shot.
Fair enough. Now, going back to mental health and antidepressants, if somebody's on SSRIs right now or other ones, what would your advice be to them if they're wanting to, get off of those? Like, what does that process look like to be able to do it safely without some of the bad side effects?
First of all, you have to have a professional that you trust. I think that's paramount because you need somebody who can tell you what you're walking into. And along the way, if this is normal, if this is abnormal, if this is dangerous, or if this is common, what you can do to mitigate this versus there's nothing you can do to mitigate it. Having those kinds of understandings and those kind of safety nets is important. So the first thing is find somebody that you trust as far as a healthcare professional to help you along this pathway. And unfortunately, I don't think there's that many. But the next thing is these things are different for everybody. Everybody has similar symptomatology. Like for SSRIs in particular, everybody has fatigue. Everybody has brain zaps, right? This electrical pulse sensation, and it comes out of nowhere. It feels like your brain's being electrocuted, and it happens for months on end for a lot of patients. It depends on how long you were on the antidepressant, what the dosage is. It depends on how you want to taper. Right? Like some patients can taper off quickly and some patients need to taper off very slowly. Some patients' side effect profile is very bad versus others. And there's ways to mitigate these things with natural stuff. Proper nutrition is incredibly important. Proper exercise, proper sleep. But all of these things are usually disheveled by the time a patient gets to you. And building those things back while they're tapering off is a very challenging thing. So you need to have people that are put in place and know what they're doing when it comes to all of this. But the thing that I would say that's most important is you absolutely should, because one of the things is people don't know if they can, or people don't know if they really do have this illness is going to last forever or something like that. You need to come off of the medications. These medications alter your neurochemistry, they mess with your brain, and they do nothing but bad for you. And a lot of patients, once they get off, it's like the shackles, the chains have been released for them. It's like they're living their lives again. Early childhood memories come back. Aspects of their lives, if somebody's been taking SSRIs for 10 years, after they're off for 6 or 8 months, they look at that 10-year period and it's just like this dark void of like blur that they don't really understand. And they see all the stuff before that and after that clearly. There's got to be people that will support you. If you have a job that is something in particular, like if you are a pilot or something where lives literally depend on it, you need to be much more careful about how you taper, things of that nature. So there's a million things to look at. But once again, the most important thing, find somebody that you trust to help you get off of them, somebody who has maybe a good track record or really understands what they're doing, and commit yourself to doing it.
Now, you've mentioned diet and exercise a lot here. In your mind, when you say having a good diet, what does that mean for the average person?
First, the very first thing is this: get rid of all processed stuff. If it has more than 5 ingredients in it, just get rid of it. If it has 50 things that are chemicals that you can't read in it, get rid of it. Get rid of all the processed foods. Okay. You need to intake enough salt, right? Sodium, magnesium, calcium, these things play a huge role in a lot of different pathways. You need to be taking in good, healthy food. You need to be eating enough times a day. A lot of people get on like really crazy health kicks, and some of them are useful, right? Ketogenic diet is wildly useful in terms of getting off of antipsychotic medications, SSRIs. The literature on them is very good. Carnivore diet has been very useful for chronic pain, for joint problems, for chronic inflammatory processes, things like that. But I try to steer people away from extreme dieting in any way, shape, or form. Your body usually knows and craves what it needs. And that's a reality. You have to listen to what you are craving. And even to the point of sometimes sugars and things like that. I know that for some patients, when they're coming off of SSRIs, they crave sugar, like profoundly crave sugar, and they lose large amounts of weight. And their body's craving energy because it's torching through something. So listening to your body is incredibly important during these times. But I think the basics of it is getting rid of processed foods, eating more natural foods. And if your healthcare provider thinks it's in particular beneficial for you, things like ketogenic or carnivore diet can be useful.
Yeah, we just had Dr. Sean Baker on here last week or the week before. I can't remember now, but
yeah, the carnivore guy.
Yeah. No, great guy. And he said the same thing. At the end of the day, regardless of what, get rid of the processed foods, limit your carbs when you can. And sometimes the carnivore diet's not for everybody because they can't sustain it. If you don't like it, it's not going to work. Now, you talked about craving certain things. Now, there's a lot of people out there that every day they crave sugar. How do you delineate between craving in the undisciplined way, something that your body actually is wanting and needing?
And I was in particular talking about people coming off of SSRIs sometimes have like severe crave. This is out of nowhere. This isn't, I just really like chocolate. No, they crave sugar. Like they could drink sugar water, like by the gallon. As far as what you're talking about, I think that's pretty standard, right? If you're eating donuts all day and you're a little bit overweight and so forth, so on, you got to cut the donuts. There's a lot of different ways to look at different dieting profiles. And I try to not box up anybody into anything particular. One of the most common diets that you're going to find is maybe 50% carbohydrate, 30% protein, and 20% fat. Most of those fats, 15 to 18%, should be mono and polyunsaturated fats. Most of those carbohydrates, to the tune of 35 out of that 50, or 35 of the 50% there, should be complex carbohydrates. So I'd say you can break these things down in a million different ways for different people, but it really does you do have to look at people individualistically. You need to look at their exercise profiles. You need to look at their body type. Are they mesomorphic? Are they ectomorphic, endomorphic? All of these things play a pretty important role. So in general, I think everybody generally knows how to eat healthy. Fruits, veggies, meats. Don't stock up on soda pop and cakes and stuff like that. But at a more sophisticated level, when you work with a provider that actually can help you, they're going to fine tune your diet to you.
Yeah. Basically do the opposite of what they tell you with the food pyramid.
The food pyramid is stupid. Yeah, it's worthless. Yeah, I used to work out a lot, and I used to spend maybe 3-4 hours in the gym every single day. I had about 30 more pounds on me, and I never followed anything that the food pyramid said.
No, I think I've said it before. I think the food pyramid was one of the biggest atrocities ever put upon the American people. I think that is, you can link back a lot what's going on now health-wise back to the food pyramid. I think it was absolutely so detrimental to our health, our mental health, our physical health, and everything in between. It led to a lot of misery and death all throughout America. And that was what the ag department was telling us to do, our government was telling us to do, and it's absolutely insane. The government, when it comes to health, should have no credibility just based on that food pyramid. when you're talking about some different alternatives to some of these prescriptions, if people are going through mental health issues, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, getting that diet on track, but then also is there some natural remedies that you might recommend?
Yeah. And once again, it goes by case basis, right? One of the things that a lot of people find beneficial for anxiety is magnesium, right? Magnesium has been shown to be incredibly beneficial for lowering anxiety levels. For people who are suffering with focus issues, ashwagandha, lion's mane, things like that have been shown to be efficacious. There's plenty of things in the natural world, but I also don't lean too much into overprescribing a bunch of pills. If you can get it naturally, that's always the best way. But natural things in a pill is maybe second best, because unfortunately you have to look for charlatans on each side, right? If you dump all your prescription meds, but somebody writes you 56 nutraceuticals, you traded one pill for the other. Now, one pill is much safer than the other, but do you really need this other one? So I always operate from the goal of trying to mitigate everything as best as possible naturally, and then adding additional supplementation in down the line is possible as well. And the idea is also to give the body what the body needs to build what it needs to build. Right. So, and what I say there is, instead of opposing the body or this or that or the other thing, if you think that somebody has serotonin levels that are low and you think that's affecting their mood, you measure the labs and you get their serotonin levels, and then you give them the building blocks of serotonin, like 5-hydroxytryptophan. That's where you get that's what you need. That's the precursor molecule, right? So you give the body the things that it actually needs, because then the body can fine tune how much of it to make. If I just dump serotonin inside of you, then the body doesn't know how to mitigate that, because I gave it the effector. If I give it what it needs to build the effector, it'll build how much it needs.
For those that, whether it's depression, PTSD, we'll talk a little bit about PTSD here in a second. I have some thoughts on that. But what's your thoughts on the treatment of those with ibogaine and some of the other psychedelics that they are seeing some good positive results with?
I'll say that I have limited insights on this topic. People have been using microdosing psilocybin, all sorts of different things. I don't know enough about it to have a meaningful discussion on it. I will say this: I'm not a huge fan of using hallucinogenics and things like that, because I feel like it can go sideways pretty quickly. If people's levels increase a little bit too much and they wind up having hallucinations or something like that, that can actually be profoundly damaging long term. If you've ever seen somebody who has a bad trip or something, and then they fall down the rabbit hole for the next 40 years of their life. So I am very hesitant to use any of those things. But with that being said, again, I'm not well studied on it. And there is a lot of literature out there stating it's providing useful benefits. And quite a few practitioners that I work with and I have discussions with pretty frequently, they think it's useful. So take that with a grain of salt. It's not my cup of tea.
And your thoughts on THC?
THC, another thing that I'm not wildly educated on, but in the last couple of years in particular, they've been able to get different strains for very different reasons. THC is natural. They can get ones that make you more hungry. Patients that are suffering from anorexia can take certain types of THC. Cancer patients that have extreme pain, they've extracted certain types of THC that target pain signals and pain pathways, so forth and so on. So I think that there's a lot of research to be done, and that there's an amount of utility that can be had with THC. But again, it's not something that I use.
Gotcha. No, that's good insight. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about PTSD, because I think PTSD is one of the laziest diagnoses on the planet. Now, pretty much anything can be lumped under PTSD. My observations, knowing lots of veterans in this community, there's guys that are clearly clinically depressed, traditional symptoms of caused by genuine trauma. And then there's lots of folks that are getting to the military that quite frankly didn't experience a lot of combat, didn't experience a lot of trauma. I don't mean to downplay some of the folks that are on a fob for a long time, always under stress. There's some things there. I think those are different. But then there's a lot of people that are challenged when they get out of the military and are now readjusting to the civilian world. I speak from experience. I really don't believe that I suffered from any PTSD in that sense. I've seen a lot of crazy things, been blown up, been shot at, did a lot of shooting, all those things. Honestly, I don't feel like those things bother me that much, to be honest with you. What I did struggle with was transitioning out of the military. And I literally went from a combat deployment 2 or 3 months later, I was working for the Department of State, which you talk about a complete opposite culture from what I was used to. And it was challenging for me. And there was a long time that I spent a lot of time self-medicating with booze and just feeling really bad. And talk a little bit about that PTSD. Now everybody has PTSD. Like you get somebody honks at you in your car, you have PTSD, but everything now falls underneath this umbrella. And I just think it's really bad medicine.
I think a lot of people are self-diagnosing, but also at the same time, our medical establishment is known very much to probably overdiagnose a lot of these things. We've gone from a place in medicine where there is no longer first do no harm, which is the core tenet of the Hippocratic Oath, to a place where it's like the patient should feel no unease in their life. Like that's like it's almost like the mainstay of medicine now. Doctors are just paid to agree with you and talk about how much of a victim you are and, how bad everything is and how everybody else is wrong and you're good, because that keeps people coming back, to be completely honest. But I think people handle things different ways, right? I agree 100% with what you said. Nowadays, everybody, has PTSD. Their boss yelled at them and all of a sudden they have PTSD or something like that. Real world stuff has gone by and by, but with real stuff, like real PTSD, people experience things and handle things very differently. Some people are built with more wherewithal. They had upbringings where they handled pressures better, and maybe they were taught to handle pressures better. And I think that these things all play important roles. If you read any of the better psychologists and psychiatrists in the past and things of that nature, they talk about how the nurture of your environment, your childhood, your upbringing, who your parents were, how they raised you to be resilient or to be weak and things like that. These things all play a huge role. Whether or not you experience the things in real time and deal with them in real time. Some people don't deal with things as they come. They package them up and they bottle them up and they shove them down until they explode someday because they never address what's going on in their life or they don't internally reflect on things. I think that those things are incredibly important. When you're experiencing things in your life, you need to pay attention to them and you need to pay attention to how you feel about them and, how to overcome them. And you always have to operate from a position of strength, with the mentality that you can overcome everything. Nothing is new under the sun. And somebody else has been through the same thing. As unique as we like to all believe that we really are, the human experience is not unique. So I think that there is something to be said about that and understanding that even if you feel like a victim, somebody else has been through worse. And you can overcome this because somebody else has overcome twice as much. So I think it's really all about approaching it from an empowering standpoint. And that sounds like new age, but I would say it's like I'm a much more Christ-centered person, right? I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus, and that's where I gain my strength. But regardless, I try to operate from a position of strength, and I try to empower people to understand that they have the ability to overcome things. And when people are suffering from PTSD, you can empower them to overcome that and to face those things in real time without diminishing those things at the same time. The old school psychologists would do things like immersion therapy. Right? Oh, you have anxiety in this situation? Let's take you to that situation. You're afraid to fly? Let's get you on a plane tomorrow. Force you to get through it and to overcome your fear. Maybe it is a new age thing that people don't understand what courage is anymore, because that's what all of this revolves around, is courage to face things and courage to overcome things. Courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and walking anyway and doing it anyway. So I think that once again, this stuff all goes back to perhaps the most simplistic discussions that need to be had, but maybe uncomfortable discussions that need to be had. People don't like talking to a patient about their trauma. People don't like asking patients difficult questions about trauma and about what they've been through and about what aspects of this were you responsible for and what aspects weren't you responsible for. So, because you can only attack the things that you're responsible for. Right. The other thing you have to learn to live with and you have to learn to deal with those things. And there's approaches and techniques to learn to deal with those things, but you can only really control the things you're responsible for and your own actions and your own reactivity patterns and so forth and so on. Getting patients to learn what's in their power and what's not in their power. Again, this goes back to maybe a Christian root, the serenity prayer, right? You accept the things that you cannot change, you change the things that you can, and you need insight and wisdom in order to know the difference between those two things. And I think all of these are the mainstays of how to deal with PTSD and things like that. And I even believe for the people who come in and are not really suffering PTSD, that doctors are not paid to be your friends. They're paid to be expert. And you do need to analyze how fragile is this person. You don't just want to crush somebody. But if they're not fragile, you need to be firm with them. You need to say, listen, stop being a victim.
Yeah.
Right. You need to grow up. This is the real world. And there's a time and a place for that, right? You don't take somebody who's weak and broken and just scream at them. But at the same time, there is a time and place for that. And God forbid you do that. I don't take insurance. I have my own private practice. I'm not beholden to anybody. I am able to get away with practicing as I see fit. If you took that approach into a modern medical institution, you would probably find yourself out of a job quickly.
No, I'll tell you from my own experience, I think you hit on something that's pretty profound. What you just stated is almost the opposite model of modern psychiatry, because what I see when you go into some of these sessions is you have somebody in front of you saying, you know what? It's really not your fault, all this things that's going on. It's because you have X, Y, and Z. And now you're a victim of your own circumstances. So you no longer have to take responsibility for your actions. And I do think whether it's PTSD or other mental health issues, and you touched on it earlier with the narcissist, whatever, bipolar guy back there, not only is it a way to get attention, but then also it conveniently is also a way to avoid personal responsibility. It justifies you just being a crappy person, being crappy at your job, being crappy to other people around you, just being a menace to society. But you know what? I have PTSD or I'm bipolar or whatever else. When before you had that excuse, somehow you were able to maintain a level of interaction with people where you just weren't an asshole.
This is what I was saying earlier when I was discussing the behavioralists versus the geneticists and how modern medicine has disempowered the patient by removing responsibility. It's all full circle stuff. Once you grasp the way the medical model works and you understand it as a business for disease creation, illness perpetuation for profit, once you understand that system, it's as easy as any other system. You know how it works, the way the pieces move.
Yeah. And JJ, I see your comment over here. I'm going to put it up right now. Look, this is one of the things that I think is severely overlooked in the United States too, is our law enforcement and first responders. The military is getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, in that PTSD. There's definitely people coming home broken. There's no doubt about that. And the problem is most military guys like me, we're a little too proud to ask for help. And then what we end up doing is self-medicating, usually by drinking or later on illicit drugs. And then you just go down to a spiral that's worse and worse. But I think there definitely needs to be more attention to law enforcement and first responders, and you guys aren't getting the credit that you deserve or the treatments that you deserve. And I do think what I hope doesn't happen is that we go with the same model that we've applied to veterans and just start medicating people across the board, because the last thing I want is law enforcement responding and they're on SSRIs or barbiturates or whatever else we got going on, because I don't think they help. I really don't. I think they make people worse. Absolutely. What I'll do right now, folks, I'll go through and start throwing some of the questions that you guys posted. And I'll say this, Doc, you can add whatever you want to this. You know, I don't think anything we give here is going to be personalized medical. And some of these questions sound very much like that. You may need to talk to a physician, but I'll throw them up there and I'll let the doc handle them as he would see fit. Patriot 8x2 says Moxidol for anxiety is classified as a peptide used in Russia for few use issues, one of them getting possibly of benzos. I have been on clonazepam for 3 years now, 2 milligrams to 0.4 milligrams daily. I guess it's not really a question. You got anything to add to that, Doc?
I don't know what Moxidol is, but look, clonazepam, Klonopin, how much did he say he's taking? 2 milligrams to 0.0 milligram daily. Okay. So 2 milligrams is a pretty high dose throughout your day. That's almost the equivalent of a Xanny bar. So look, what that really is, that's no different than drinking, I don't know, probably 12 beers a day or something like that. And the side effect profile of coming off of it will be identical to alcohol withdrawal. When I say it's the same exact thing, I literally mean it, as in it is the exact same thing. So coming off of that, what it's really doing is people use alcohol because it frees you up, it loosens your inhibitions, it makes you more talkative, more outgoing, it numbs bad emotions, unless you drink too much and then you fall into the darkness. But over time, all of those things transition into numbing effects. And clonazepam is the same exact thing. It's used for the same reasons and it will result in the same things. So I would highly recommend tapering off and finding a healthcare professional to get you to taper off. Just for some personal anecdotal evidence, by the way, for the people sitting and listening, so that they don't think I'm just some asshole sitting in a chair talking about things he doesn't know about. I was on Paxil, Seroquel, SSRIs, clonazepam, 3 milligrams a day or so at the height for over 15 years. I tried coming off of them 10, 15, 20 times. I was institutionalized several times in my life in psych wards because my withdrawals were so severe coming off of them. Not only am I a physician who became a physician in part because of these reasons, but I'm somebody who actually walked through this entire walk. So when I talk about the withdrawals, when I talk about these medications, I have vast experience both personally and professionally with them. And that's one of the reasons that I believe so much in coming off of them, because so many people don't believe they can. I personally did it. At the end, I tried every single taper I possibly could. In the end, I actually went cold turkey. I completely came off of everything just like that. And it was very miserable for about 6 months. You persevere. But anyway.
Yeah. Question for doctor. We have a father with Alzheimer's, 82. Is there anything new that has any chance of helping him?
Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of things that you have to look into about like why he got Alzheimer's, whether it's a familial history of Alzheimer's, whether he was on statin medications, so forth and so on, cholesterol patterns, things like that. I did Alzheimer's research at USC for quite some time. There were no good pharmaceutical agents, the acetylcholine receptor blockers and all of those kinds of things. Those were never shown to be beneficial. So first, I would look at the pharmacology that he is currently on and see what, if anything, can be reduced. But unfortunately, to my knowledge, there really is no good reversal for Alzheimer's disease.
And I do know I've seen some studies talking about either carnivore and or ketogenic diets that seem to have some benefit for Alzheimer's patients, also preventing Alzheimer's. I don't know if that's worth a shot.
Absolutely true. Yes.
Apparently you look like a probation officer that Harold had in 3rd grade. I don't know the past probation officers.
That's the best comment for sure.
Psychologists and psychiatrists have a lot to answer for. I think most people of sound mind would agree with that.
They really do.
TM55 MX says, Dr. Z, my wife was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme in April. She has had 2 resections to remove tumor material. She was prescribed with dexamethasone to control the edema. Follow-on question or statement is the steroids reduce her immune system and she's developed PJP or Nocardia, disseminated zoster and interbacter cloacae complex. Who is dictating the standard of care treatments?
Yeah, so what I would say about the glioblastoma multiforme, first and foremost, I would have to ask, is she vaccinated? Because glioblastoma used to be pretty rare. Now there's a lot of cases cropping up after the vaccine, and there's questions of turbo aggressive cancers. Now, pneumocystis nocardia and disseminated herpes zoster, enterobacter. From the dexamethasone, it's definitely possible the dexamethasone steroid could have suppressed the immune system enough. I'm not sure if she was on any chemotherapy or anything else that weakened her system to get her all of those things. The dictation of standard of care is that the large-scale medical apparatuses of the AMA and CDC and WHO, those are the people that are dictating standard of care. Just for your information, I would look into alternative and repurposed cancer protocols and therapies. I would look at Paul Merrick's new book, which you can find at the FLCCC for free. I would also look into the work of Dr. William Mackis, who is a radiation oncologist in Canada, Alberta, I believe, who has written a lot of great papers, orthomolecular medicine. Look into ivermectin, fenbendazole, look into ketogenic diet, look into hyperbaric oxygen, and so forth and so on. If you go to the places that I just told you, you will find amazing literature and very good alternative approaches to the allopathic model.
He said, to follow up, my wife was on SSRIs her entire adult life. Maxon asked, does the mRNA shed to those who do not vax, who did not
Yes.
vax? And
yes, shedding's 100% real. And by the way, it's not unheard of. This is not a new thing. In fact, like just on any of the live virus vaccines, like the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, in the literature dating back for decades, you are not supposed to go around any immunocompromised individuals if you get a live virus injection because you can shed it onto another person. Shedding is the same principle in general. It's more complex and there's some more sophisticated aspects to it. But if you think about just like having a viral cold and like sneezing on somebody, that's shedding, right? It's the same exact thing. So when you do get an injection, yes, you can absolutely to other people.
Interesting. Jason, sponsor, asks, the hard part is, how do you find a person you trust to live in BFE? And my options are limited. So when it comes to somebody trying to find a doctor like yourself, what are some things that people should look for, should search for? Just a general practitioner, I guess.
First and foremost, integrative or functional. If you use those words, you will almost inevitably arrive at somebody who has probably a closer mindset to what I am. So integrative and functional medicine. Also, I would consider talking to naturopathic doctors. Naturopaths are not quacks. Don't get me wrong, there are quack naturopaths out there, but naturopaths are not quacks. Naturopaths have been correct for the last 40 years when they've been telling people, don't vaccinate, don't use statins, don't use SSRIs. These are all poison. They've been saying this for 50 years. So the shift needs to happen in the people recognizing that, oh, these people that we thought were like tinfoil hat doctors really aren't, believe it or not. But yes, functional integrative doctors, that's the first step. And then ask your doctor questions. Right. You get to know your physician. It doesn't have to be like some kind of militant, you sit down, you tell me these things, I spit out answers and write you a script. Get to know your doctor. Understand, people say, where do I find a good doctor? If your doctor supported COVID mandates, transgender butchery of children, and 9-month abortion, he's probably not the doctor for you. If he reaches to write a prescription before you can even get words out of your mouth, he's probably not the right doctor for you. You'll be able to have conversations with your doctor and see where they are and select your doctor wisely, you know. This is the person you're entrusting with your health.
That's great advice. This is an interesting question and something that we've talked about on the show before, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. It's fluoridated water or just city water in general, but especially fluoride. I don't know if you have done any research on what fluoride does to the brain and the cognitive function of a brain. If you have some additional input on that, I'd love to hear it.
Try to drink unfluoridated water. Fluoride has profound effects on the brain. It lowers IQ. It calcifies the pineal gland. Fluoride's no good. So if you can stay away from it, stay away from it. If you can't stay away from it, unfortunately, you can't.
What I can tell you is our kids have been using unfluoridated toothpaste, and we've stayed away from unfluoridated water their entire lives, and they've never had a cavity. And I'll tell you, I have to get on. They're not like brushing their teeth 4 times a day. I can tell you that because I'm always on to them about, did you brush your teeth yesterday? I forgot. Come on, man. Are the latest PTSD meds SSRIs? They seem to be more harmful than not taking them. Very dangerous.
They use a lot of different, in psych, a lot of things are used randomly off label for any intent and purposes. Most of it seems to be experimentation. And that's both my personal and professional experience with psychiatry. But yes, they can use SSRIs for PTSD because there's always a lot of overlapping issues. If you notice, most people are not diagnosed with one thing. They're diagnosed with a whole group of things.
Yeah, pretty much seems like just about anything. If you're a veteran, chances are you're probably going to be diagnosed with PTSD if you come in with a bellyache. I think that's just the reality of it. I asked you this question already, but if there's anything you want to add to this, Chris Barrett says, what are the best vitamins for depression and PTSD, or what foods?
Best vitamins for depression. Once again, because depression can be so wide ranging, right? It really can. Like I said, you could have a thyroid problem. You could have a dietary problem. You could have a just life problem. It could have nothing to do with vitamins and minerals. But in general, make sure if you're not eating the way that you should be eating, and it is difficult in today's day and age. When you walk into a grocery store, all I see is poison, to be completely honest. So if you don't have a farmer's market and something like that, just make sure you're taking B vitamins, make sure you're taking A, D, E, and K, make sure you have enough iodine in your diet for thyroid function, make sure you're getting enough vitamin D and sunlight, just very basic things.
And guys, I can't, no one brought this up in the comments, but look, at the end of the day, you can't avoid fitness, right? Like fitness has to become part of your life. If you want to be mentally and physically capable and prepared. One of the things we talk about on this channel all the time, it's great to have firearms, but man, if you're not getting out there and exercising on a regular basis, guys, you're not going to be physically prepared when there is a threat. But on top of that, the amount of degradation that your body is going through every single day that you're not out there pushing it physically. And for some of you, that can start off with a 10-minute walk a day and then increase that gradually. But everybody out there, I'm telling you, I feel such a difference when I go through these phases of life where I'm super busy and I'm not getting to the gym regularly or getting to exercise regularly. I notice such a huge difference in my mood, in my cognitive ability, in every aspect of my life. Like, no matter what I do is I got all this stuff to do and I can always make an excuse not to go to the gym or get outside and go for a run or whatever. You get so much dividends by taking that time and setting it aside and spending 30 minutes exercising, doing something. And I definitely believe in resistance training, good cardio training too, but you got to do it. And I think there's a good portion, and this is just off the top of my head. I have nothing to, this is speculation on Gary's part, but I think 80% of the problems, or a big portion of the problems with veterans getting out of the military, is they get out of the military, they're going through this bad transition, and one of the first things they do is they stop doing PT, they stop exercising, they're eating bad, they're drinking a lot, and it is such a detrimental effect on your life and your quality of life. Like, you can't avoid it, guys. Get out there, and girls, get out there, go exercise, lift some weights. I don't know if you.
And I can't agree any more with that. Not just from it's self-evident that exercise has all of these great benefits. It helps you with your mood. It helps you with your sleep. It helps you with detoxing. It makes you just feel better. But all of this is obviously true at a biochemical level and a physiological level. It increases beta endorphins. It increases natural opiates and reduces pain. It allows your body to basically shift the entire lymphatic system to drain things better, to get toxins out of your body better. It increases temperature and burns things out of your, everything about it, right? Everything about exercise is useful. So you don't have to go and throw around weights all day. God knows I don't do that stuff anymore. But just getting into the gym and being active, actually active, not going in there and slothing around and like lifting a weight or two. Go in there for 30 minutes and pay attention. Pay attention and focus on actually working out and getting a good workout in. And think positively about it. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah. If you want to go do jiu-jitsu or something like that, do that. CrossFit, whatever floats your boat. But you got to get out there. You got to get it active. You got to get those muscles moving. And man, it's a world of difference when you're not. Jeff Johnson, the wise old sage that he is. I believe in PTSD. I just think we should medicate with alcohol like our granddads did. Talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about the negative effects of alcohol, because I'll let you take that and I'll throw in some personal anecdotal information on that.
I'm going to go ahead and say that I love what he just said. I wish that we could go back to the most natural things on earth. Listen, having a drink to cool off or to calm down or to like going out with your friends and having a couple something, this isn't the end of the world. It's really wild that things like that are demonized, but taking 15 different pills is somehow perpetuated. So no, I actually agree with that statement. Don't go become a drunk. My grandfather was a drunk. I know how that goes, but I think I was a drunk for quite some time, actually. But I don't see anything wrong with that statement.
It's definitely, having a few drinks from time to time is definitely a better option than being high all day on SSRI or barbiturates or whatever else. I will tell you that, being the hard charging guy that I am, I've never been a person of moderation. So when it was time to drink, it was time to drink. And I never drink a little bit. Never felt like I was an alcoholic. Definitely did a lot of self-medication when I got out of the military. And it got to the point to where sometimes it just act a fool while I was drunk, and my wife would get pissed off at me. And I told her, hey, you know what? I'm going to quit drinking. And for a while there, I definitely there was times we go to events or social events. And for a long time, and I was like, oh, I really want to drink. Promised her I wouldn't. I will tell you, about 3 or 4 months into that, I was no longer drinking just because she asked me not to. I was no longer drinking because I could tell a difference in my overall clarity and the difference how I felt throughout the week. Even if I would not drink throughout the week, it'd usually be like a weekend thing where I'd have 6 to 12 beers. But then, man, I felt so shitty the rest of the week, and definitely a lot of brain fog. And I can tell now such a huge difference of not having done that probably for 2 or 3 years now. Yeah, to me, it was a big benefit. And there's definitely some of you out there that probably should, even though it's not a problem, it was never really a problem for me, but it's having a bigger negative impact in your life than you probably would ever realize or care to admit. I know that was the case for me. So take that for what it's worth.
One of the simple things that I often go through with patients: stop drinking for 3 months. Don't have any drinks for 3 months and see what happens. You know what? One thing is, if you think that's a problem, then there's an issue with your drinking immediately. If you're like, whoa, not drink for 3 months, if that's an issue off the hand, then there's a problem already. But usually after 3 months, people will see pretty significant increases in positive benefits.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true with me. That was probably about the time it took. A good 3 months. where I went from craving it when I was up, but again, I was used to getting in social events and loosening up a little bit. Next thing you run around naked. It gets weird. You guys hit me. Since I switched over there's been 47 more comments. Let's see. Yeah, that's a great question. So what's your thoughts on RFK getting appointed to director of HHS?
I couldn't be happier. We were watching the first Senate financial hearings, and I have people that are close to RFK, so we're texting him right afterwards and so forth and so on, congratulating him. So I think that he's going to do a world of good. I don't agree with everything that any politician says, but I think that RFK is going to be an excellent addition.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's definitely much more liberal in many areas, but everything he's ever said about health, wellness, Big Pharma, man, I can't say enough amens on that. Microplastics, what's your thoughts on that?
Microplastics are a poison and they're a huge problem. Basically, everything has microplastic and everybody has microplastics in them. And try not to drink from plastic as much as you can. Try to drink from glass as much as you can. Try not to use the plastic cookware as much as you. It's really funny that 2025, all we really need to do is go back 60 or 70 years and just start over and be a lot better off.
I forgot who we had on here. I think it was Clarissa we had on here where she was talking about microplastics. And that was one thing that we're pretty healthy. We're very health conscious around here. We try to eat somewhat healthy. It doesn't always work, especially with kids. But one of the things that we haven't been good at is that we have a lot of water bottles that are plastic. We have some plates and things up there, things that we use pretty regularly. They're plastic. And I just remember after one of these podcasts, I was up there cutting something on the plastic plate. And then I pull it up, the meat, like,
how much plastic did I just eat?
I'm looking at my plastic spatulas and I'm like, oh man, we got to get rid of these things. But it's very clear. And now it's been really like, I grab some steak out of the fridge and I'm cutting the plastic that it comes in. And of course it's in styrofoam underneath that. I'm like, man, I'm eating like a freaking gallon of plastic at least a year. It's freaking crazy. This is a great question. Soda. Talk a little bit about pop in general and some of the diet, some of the stuff with sucralose. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of the artificial sweeteners if you'd like to, but
I never go into any of that stuff. No diet sodas, no food. Like food dyes cause neurological issues first and foremost. If you have children, you know this on a day-to-day basis. Any food dyes cause neurological issues, behavioral problems, emotional dysregulation, all sorts of things. And this is shown in the literature as well. So I stay away from anything with food dyes, and most soda, unfortunately, has food dyes. Diets, all diet stuff, I steer clear of. Aspartame, all of those fake sweeteners. There's a large body of literature talking about the problems with that. So I steer clear of those things. Sugar in general, look, I don't demonize sugar like a lot of people demonize sugar. I don't particularly remember the last time I had soda in my house, but here and there I'll have a soda and I don't cry over having a Sprite or something like that. I think everything in moderation. Sugar tastes good and there's a reason it tastes good. Just don't drink it all day, every single day, and you'll probably be okay. Again, I'm not one of those people that's don't ever put sugar in anything and it's so bad for you. No, sugar is one of the major components of glycolysis, or is the major component of glycolysis and a staple in your energetic profiles. If you're on a keto diet, it's a different story. But
I said, I don't understand anything you just said, that last statement. It was glycologic.
Oh, glycolysis. So you have a couple different energetic pathways in the body. Your body uses a pathway called glycolysis to break down sugar into ATP and energy. Your body uses beta oxidation to break down fatty acid oxidation to break down fats. You can also flux amino acids, proteins into either one of those pathways and create energy. So your body can create energy from any of the macromolecules. When you get into sugar, it spike your insulin levels, you burn out the pancreas. And if you have too much sugar in your blood, it glycosylates or sticks to the endothelium, the vascular internal layers, causes like crunchiness and hardness, can damage them. But that's if you're somebody who eats and drinks sugar all the time. Like, I think everybody knows from the most general standpoints, how much sugar is too much, right? If you're drinking a 6-pack of Coke a day, there's an issue. If you're eating sugar cookies all day long, there's an issue. Everything in moderation is okay.
Jason says quitting soda is almost as hard as quitting smoking. And I think a lot of people have experienced that.
Absolutely. You can look at almost anything as addictive in the human body, anything that you get used to or your body gets used to, because you will have withdrawal, right? Say like quitting drinking coffee, you'll have caffeine withdrawals. Quitting drinking soda, you'll have sugar withdrawals. Your body is used to having that.
I'll comment on this, even if you don't. Jordan Hurst is not necessarily a mental health question, but what are some ways to relieve back pain?
It really depends on what the back pain's from, right? If you have a torn ligament versus a pulled muscle versus a slipped disc versus a fracture, all of these things are different. But standard therapies, right? Number one, rice therapy, rest, ice, heat, elevation, things like that are always useful. The timing profiles of this is incredibly useful. When you heat something, it brings blood to the site. You need blood to bring nutrients and to bring beneficial things to heal. When you cool, you stop blood supply. Right. So you freeze things. So during inflammatory processes, cooling things reduces inflammation versus warming things allows you to pull away toxins and things like that. So the timing profiles of when you want to do this is important. Once again, eating with highly processed foods, higher amounts of sugars, things like that are pro-inflammatory. So it's going to make your pain worse. Another thing to take into account is depending on what the injury is, if it's a bone issue, working out's not going to help it. But if it's a ligamentous or a musculoskeletal or a muscular issue, the way that you work out is going to be incredibly important. And that might go back all the way to stretching again and very slowly building those muscles back. Don't ever go too quickly. Anybody who's ever been injured in the gym knows that if you go back too fast, you just wind up worse than you were in the first place. So there's always a big level of patience in these things. And also, a carnivore diet has been shown to reduce musculoskeletal pain at very high levels.
And folks, I'll just tell you, I don't know how Doc feels about them, but I go to the chiropractor on a pretty regular basis, and you got to find a good one. And yeah, there's some quacks out there that can mess you up, but I'll tell you, just from personal experience in multiple situations, going all over, I severely injured my back when I was really young. And my grandmother had 8 back surgeries, got worse every single time. My mom had multiple back surgeries, got worse every single time. And so they were telling me that I need to go to surgery. And even I was probably 13 years old, 12, 13 years old, I was like, I'm not doing it. And I ended up going to the chiropractor. I was doing like 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And at the end of that 6 weeks, my back was completely fine. Everything was good. And I'm still, my wife and the kids, we go to our local chiropractor probably once every 3 or 4 weeks now. And I feel a difference in multiple different ways. So I don't know what your thoughts are on chiropractors, and feel free to completely say the opposite if that's how you feel, Doc.
No, I think, once again, I think vetting out your medical professionals is incredibly important. Chiropractors, one chiropractor I know in particular, Dr. Bill Lionberger, is an excellent clinician and one of the smartest people I've ever met. So you have to pick and choose who you go to. Chiropractors can be incredibly beneficial, incredibly useful, and I would pick a chiropractor over a spine surgeon every single day of the week for the rest of my life, always.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a big note on that, and I've probably been to a dozen or so chiropractors. If they don't examine you every single time and they do the same 3 adjustments on you every single time, guess what? Find another one. That's what you need to do. The guy that we go to, it's like being there the first time every single time. He takes a look exactly what's going on, and it's a different experience every single time. It's the right experience every single time. Great guy. Let's see what else we got in here. Let's see. As I'm going through this, Doc, any other big advice that you have for people out there?
That's a giant question. Pay close attention to who you put your trust in terms of the healthcare system. I unfortunately don't believe that there is a lot of redeemable qualities in allopathic medicine today. I think that most doctors completely failed to protect their patients. They failed their oath, and they failed not only the public, but themselves. And I think that it is only fair for people not to trust the medical establishment moving forward. So the biggest and most important thing that I could tell anybody is take your health into your own hands. Nobody cares more about your health than you do. I assure you, no healthcare professional cares about your health more than you care about your health. And you'll become an expert in your own problems, right? And that's not to say to mull on your problems and to sit on your problems and to stew in them. That's saying if you have problems, start looking into the solutions. We are in the age of the internet. We have more information at our fingertips than any generation has had perhaps in their lifetimes. So the information is all out there. And one of the easiest things about my profession nowadays is actually just vetting out the information that patients bring to me. Patients come with a bunch of questions. I do some education. I point them in the right directions. And it's a process that we work through together. And I learn just as much from my patients these days that they learn from me, to be completely honest, because patients will come in with things I've never heard of and talk about them. And I'll look them up and I'll say, you don't want to do that. Or, yeah, absolutely, this is great. And if it's working for you, I can use it elsewhere. Take your health into your own hands. Vet out your healthcare professionals. If you are using pharmacy, try and get in touch with a healthcare professional to see if you can reduce the amount of pharmaceuticals that you're on. There's nothing more important than your health.
Yeah, the mainstream media says don't do your own research. It sounds like you're telling everybody to do the opposite of that.
The exact opposite of that. Always do your own research to the fullest extent of your capabilities.
The last question I got for you right now, because it is a big one that we see in the media, and I think it's very tempting for a lot of people out there: Ozempic and medications like Ozempic.
I can't explain how much I hate Ozempic. So not only are you just like faking and fooling the body to reduce weight and fat and things like that, there's all sorts of other problems that come with it. Now that there's fertility issues, there's like seizure issues, there's 500 different adverse effects that come along with this. And what I'll say is the whole idea about losing weight is you're not just losing weight isn't about just losing pounds. It's about changing your life and changing your lifestyle and changing your diet and changing your exercise. And those things, the benefits of those things isn't loss of weight. That's a side effect of the benefits of those things. The benefits of those things are profound in almost every single direction. Foregoing the actual work that it takes to get healthy to use a quick fix will always blow up in your face. And I'll say it like this. When I taught for the USM, for the boards for medicine from 2019 to about 2023. And just like every student, students want to take shortcuts. They want to take shortcuts to memorize. They want to take shortcuts to learn. They want to take shortcuts to get better grades. And I tell them on day one, always, the only shortcut is realizing early that there's no shortcuts. What you don't learn now, you will have to learn later. What you forgot because you learned it poorly will bite you in the ass when you have a patient. You should have learned today, you put off to tomorrow, is going to build and build until you collapse under the weight of all the things that you didn't know or you didn't learn. And it's like that with everything in life. This isn't just about losing weight or anything. It's always about this. The journey, the work that it takes to achieve something pays dividends in all sorts of areas. The work that it takes to get healthy, you lose weight and you get healthier in the process, but the mental strength, the clarity, the all-around health benefits, there's 50 other things that work into the mix of going through those things and doing those things. So it's worth the work. The process is part of the reward. And again, cheating these things. In New York City to this day, right now, they do gastric bypass surgeries on 14-year-old kids that are overweight. Oh, their diet failed. We're just going to remove their stomach. It's maddening. So no Ozempic, no GLP-1 analogs. Look, if it seems too good to be true and it seems like you're taking shortcuts and it seems really lazy, that's because it is too good to be true. It is a shortcut and it is lazy and it will bite you.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that have had gastric bypass surgery in the past, and yeah, it worked for 6 months. And then about 6 months to a year after that, they were back to the same weight that they were before it happened. But now they just have half a stomach and they're having all kinds of
and they have digestive problems and they have dumping syndrome and they have to eat a very strict diet anyway. And they have a big surgical scar and they have gastric adhesions that go and lyse them later on. So they need more surgeries. It's a hamster wheel.
Yeah. Healthcare is a business, and business is good for a lot of people out there. Yeah, folks, you got to do the work. You got to make those lifestyle changes, and there really is no way around it. Listen, Dr. Z, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. We definitely need to get you back on here and schedule a couple times. I'd love to hear your thoughts on COVID, do a deep dive on that. And it'd be great to have you back on again sometime. Folks, if you're not following Dr. Z, make sure you guys do that. Go follow him on Twitter. What other social media platforms are you on, Doc?
That's it.
See, you need a YouTube channel, man. What are you doing?
I would get thrown off and banned off of YouTube. I've gotten banned on every single aspect of the internet. I can't believe it got banned 3 times after tens of thousands of followers and stuff like that. But this time they're not banning me. I'd get kicked off of YouTube, I think.
Almost definitely. Well, Doc, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate you. You stay there. Folks, Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you share this. It's a super important episode, and we'll definitely have Doc back on again and talk a little bit more into, we'll go down the rabbit hole of COVID-19, because I think that's still worth discussing. So anyways, folks, until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk.